Hellcat.
Hello and welcome back to the channel where once again it's time for another Saturn review. I've gone for one of the most obvious games today. Of course, it's Daytona USA. It's one of these games I've been putting off doing pretty much because I've never really had a tremendous love for the Daytona series, but I thought, you know what, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to play it properly, try and get to grips with it as best as possible and give you my honest opinion of this game. Now, it's got pretty varied views from people. Some people praise it for being fantastic, having tremendous gameplay. Other people criticize it for being nowhere near as good as the arcade game. But you know, the only way I can decide is if I sit back and take a look myself. So try and enjoy my review of Daytona USA. So when the main menu rolls around, you've got arcade mode, you've got Satin mode, you've got ranking, and you've got options. Heading into options, you can change the game mode from normal, Grand Prix, and endurance. You can select the difficulty, you can select the enemy level, sound mode, stereo or mono, music test, sound test, and you can check the key configuration, which is pretty simplistic. So arcade mode and Saturn mode, very similar. Arcade mode has you against the clock, whereas Saturn mode, you don't have the timer, so you will complete the whole race. You've got 3 courses, beginner, advanced, and expert. That is it, that's your lot. Very straightforward. And in arcade mode, you can just simply select between automatic and manual. No other car choices whatsoever.
Gentlemen, start your engines.
The game itself probably doesn't need a whole lot of explaining. It's literally get on the racetrack and try and go from last to first and win the race, and that is it. It's simplistic. There's nothing else to it than that. There's no career mode, anything like that. It's literally just the arcade port of Daytona USA, which means it doesn't have a whole lot of content. So as always, we've got to get onto the nitty gritty of the game. How does it look? How does it play? How does it sound? And what kind of lifespan can you expect to get from this game, and is it worth playing today? Graphically, Daytona USA is not particularly impressive. Definitely couldn't say that. It's colourful, it's bright, and they are things I like. But of course, the drawing distance is a shocker, and it doesn't play at a particularly good frame rate. I would probably say only 20 frames a second maybe, and that impacts the overall experience, the pleasure that it gives you when you're looking at the game. It's just pretty ropey looking. Polygons sort of like drop out at the side of the screens as well, and it's popping up right in your face. It just is pretty much an ugly game. Now the cars themselves, before they get mangled when you crash into the corners and stuff, they actually look pretty good. I tend to think the detail on the cars is actually pretty nice. The lettering and the numbers look pretty good on the cars. I can't fault that. The courses themselves aren't too bad, but it's just the fact the pop-up is glaring and it's right in your face, and the frame rate is pretty ropey as well. So overall, it definitely doesn't showcase the Saturn's hardware at its absolute best. How does it sound? Well, it's got that fantastic Daytona at the beginning, which is great. It's memorable and people remember that, but in terms of the actual tracks and the music tracks for the courses, I don't tend to think this Daytona is particularly impressive. There's not a lot of music really, actual long lengthily tracks in the game, because there's only 3 courses. So you've got a different one for each track, and then you've got some little bits of music, rolling, start, stuff like that. That's okay, but there isn't actually a massive soundtrack to the game in all fairness, and I wouldn't really say it's a strength. I know a lot of people think it's got a really good soundtrack, but personally, I don't actually think it's that good. Sure, there's great sound effects for crashing, screeching around corners, that's all cool, that's all good, but music in the game, I just don't think it's actually as good as people probably remember, in all honesty. So yeah, a bit hit and miss if I'm perfectly honest. So moving on to how it plays, this tends to be the area that gets the most praise, especially from people. When they talk about it now, they always remember that Daytona USA played fantastically well and played just like the arcade game. Now, I've not played Daytona USA in the arcade, but what I will say about the Saturn game is that it is pretty jerky. and it's not particularly fun to play in my opinion. You crash a lot, and the reactions from your car when you crash, when you hit the wall and it just goes up and over, I find that really irritating. It slows you down massively, and I just think, although the game's not realistic in its the way it plays, that just makes it even more realistic, and it takes away a bit of enjoyment from the game, if I'm perfectly honest. I genuinely feel it doesn't play that well. I like power sliding around the corner. If you can get that right, that's great, but in terms of the way it actually plays, I just feel it's too jerky, and it isn't that fun, if I'm perfectly honest. I know people are going to disagree with me when I say that, but what I did after I played this game was I put Ridge Racer Revolution in on the PlayStation, and that plays so much better. It's only a few months newer than this game, but it just plays so much better, and it's so much smoother as well, and I just didn't think Daytona just fell short in a few areas, and the way that it plays was actually one of those as well. Now, being an early Saturn release, it doesn't have much in the way of lifespan. It does have Satin Mode, which lets you select different cars to play as, and there's a few different cars if you use an input code or you unlock them. There's a variety of cars to pick from. They're all pretty similar. They've all got different acceleration and grip, and they do look a bit different, but they handle pretty similar in all fairness. But one thing it does have is the addition of an animal to control. Similar to Max TT, you could control a sheep. On this game, you can be a horse. Yes, you can control a horse, and it does add a little bit of novelty value to the game. But what it doesn't do is really increase the lifespan. As there's only 3 tracks, this game is really over before you know it, and then it becomes a question of beating your best times, and that really is the only thing the game has long term. It doesn't have a 2-player mode, so it really is a short experience. If I'd have paid £40 for this probably when it came out new, I would have probably felt a little bit disappointed, in all honesty. I know someone made a comment about reviewing games years after they'd come out, but if I looked at other racing games at the time, and my favourite racing game, probably even when this came out, was probably Rock and Roll Racing, and even though it's only a 2D game, it's got so much more lifespan, and I would much rather be playing that than a game like this. Although it's 3D, it just doesn't have any longevity, and that really does impact the overall experience with a game like this. So, as always, the big question is Daytona USA worth playing in this day and age? And the firm answer from me is no. No, it's not. It's a product of its time that impressed people, being one of the first 3D racers that you could play on a home console. But fast forward, and it doesn't hold up very well whatsoever in any aspects, in my opinion. Now it's cheap. It's only about £10 if you want a complete copy. So, out of curiosity, yeah, it's worth having a look. It's not at the end of the world. It's not expensive. But for me, it is not worth playing in this day and age. So does it make my Saturn top 10? The answer is, oh hell no. It doesn't even get close. It's nowhere near as good as any of the games on my current top 10. So we'll have to wait until next week to see if another game can enter my chart. That is it for today. Thank you for watching, and as always, I shall be back with another Saturn review in the near future. Goodbye for now.